Buenas tardes, boa tarde, and good afternoon to everyone in attendance today. Welcome to our Global Perspectives on Race and Racism speaker series. My name is Dr. Jaira J. Harrington, Assistant Professor in the Black Studies Department at UIC. I will serve as moderator for today's talk, Life in Ancestral Territories, Vivir, Sabroso, by Professor Digna Mosquera. Here's the rundown of today's schedule. First, I will provide some background about the series. Then I will introduce our speaker and she will share her presentation. And last, we will have open Q&A where comments in the chat will be acknowledged and you can raise your hand so that you can dialogue with our guests, and then we will close for the afternoon. And before we begin, I would like to offer some background about the series. With support from the programming committees in the Departments of Latin American and Latino Studies, Sociology, Global Asian Studies, and Gender and Women's Studies, the Department of Black Studies is hosting the Global Perspectives on Race and Racism speaker series for fall 2023. This interdisciplinary series features scholars with expertise across the world to address the global socio-historical, economic, and systemic effects of racism. These events will provide multiple perspectives through which participants can explore the global dynamics of racism. We will see that the phenomena of race not only intersect with citizenship, belonging, and constructs of the nation state, but they also co-mingle with class, gender, sexuality, and ability. This series will highlight race and racism from a variety of disciplinary perspectives and geographic contexts. Today's speaker is Digna Mosquera. Professor Mosquera is an Afrofeminist from Chocó, Colombia. She recently finished her master's degree in economics from Howard University, and she completed her bachelor's degree in Colombia at Universidad Nacional de Colombia, a well-recognized public school in the country. Currently, she is working as a research assistant at the Center of Excellence in Housing and Public Policy at Howard University in Washington, D.C. She came to the United States as a Fulbright scholar and learned English with a Martin Luther King Jr. scholarship. In 2021, she was nominated as the Afro-Colombian of the Year. She has been a part of WIWA's Collective since 2015, an Afro-feminist collective based in Medellin, Colombia. The floor is yours, Professor Mosquera. We look forward to your presentation.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much for that amazing introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me try to share my screen and you will let me know if you can actually see it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. As Dr. Harrington was saying, my name is Digna Mosquera. I am from Chocó in Colombia. And yes, I recently finished my master's at Howard University. I am part of WIWA's Collective as well as Sol Zapaz, which is an Afro-Colombian movement here in DC. And right now I'm working in a research center at Howard University. So thank you very much for being here, for building this community and just to came and talk. I believe that this is an amazing, amazing space to connect the diaspora in so many ways. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for everyone who made possible this space. Brianna and Dr. Harrington, I will never get tired of telling you how much I admire you and how powerful do you think you are. And there are a lot of Afro-Colombians today in the room as well. So thank you very much for showing up, for coming, for showing so much love and support. I love you so much. And I think this is also like a great opportunity to, talk, like among us, like if anybody in the room wants to direct questions to me, but also to the audience of Colombians in here, I think that would be an amazing experience to connect this diaspora who, we have been denied that option of talking and knowing each other in this struggle of justice and resistance and everything. So today, as this presentation shows, we're going to talk about Black communities in Colombia and el territorio, or the territory. And the agenda that I have for today is, first, I am going to provide a really brief context of Black communities in Colombia, why territory is life, and provide some historical background on it, and to understand it better. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some ancestral practices within Afro-Colombian communities, and then I'm going to explain what is the Law 70 and why it's important for Black communities in Colombia. Then we're going to discuss a little bit about challenges and struggles of Black communities, especially Black women, and what, like practices of resistance they have been doing among their territories. And all of this will lead us to do like a debrief and build our final thoughts. So just as a brief context, according to the National Department of Statistics in Colombia, like Afro-Colombia makes up around 9.3% of the total population, but there are so many alternative sources, including the UN, including the World Bank, that states that we are around 26% of the population. And this is actually the second largest Afro-descendant population in Latin America after Brazil. Here we have the gender distribution. As you can see, the Statistics Department only reports data and asks questions about, about these two possible ways of, gender identity, as if Afro-Colombians do not identify themselves as like in other ways. So I am not going to talk much about it, but I just wanted to show, like how the struggle and invisibilization in statistics in Colombia, is going. The main languages spoken are Spanish, of course, but we have some Creole languages called like Creole San Andresano, which is spoken by Raizales communities in San Andres and Providencia, and Ripalenque, which is spoken by population in Palenque, San Basilio, which I think Mary talked a lot about it last Tuesday. The main activities that Afro-Colombians do, reported by the National Statistics Department, shows that agriculture, retail and defense and education are the main ones, but access to the job markets by Afro-Colombians are like a deeper conversation, since a lot of the practices that Afro-Colombians do are not even captured in the informal sector, are not even captured in the surveys that these institutions do. So I don't think that they are actually accurate. And finally, roughly around 67% of Afro-Colombians live in rural areas, while 33% live in urban areas. So this right here is the map of Colombia. I don't know if everybody knows the map of Colombia, but this is the map of Colombia. And in red and in, I think this is red in light orange, like you can see where Black communities are located in the country, while in purple you can see where indigenous communities are located in the purple in the country. So I have a question for you all regarding that. What do you notice from that geographic location? Like, do you notice any pattern? Do you notice something in particular about that geographical distribution from Black and indigenous communities in Colombia? You're very welcome to comment on the chat, to leave your comments on the chat, or speak if you want to speak, if you feel comfortable. If not, that's also okay. And if you don't see no pattern, that's perfectly fine as well.
Isa commented in the chat, yes, they are on the outskirts.
Exactly. That is exactly right. And that's one of the most clear ways to show how racist Colombia is, since it's being like relegating its ethnic groups to the peripheries. And usually these locations are the poorest areas in the country, and the areas with where, you know, more of the challenges, a lot of social challenges have to be addressed by communities. So when you go and look up like what is like, which one is the poorest state in the country, which one is the state with lowest education levels, you will find out there are usually these states located in the peripheries of the country. So Black communities in Colombia, as well as Black people in the world, to be honest, like have been, I think, resisting and re-existing since the Transatlantic Massacre. And the period of slavery in Colombia and all of the human practices sustained by Europe's thirst for gold were sustained by Europe's first thirst of gold. Because, you know, like the European colonizers in this side of the continent, like start their expeditions through Colombia based on the legends and stories of indigenous people of that time, because these legends and stories used to tell stories about great quantities of gold buried in the ground and even submerged in lagoons. So they started their expeditions to in search for gold based on those legends. And actually large amounts of gold were found in the country, in the like center of the country, but also in the coast. And this is how this is initially how Black communities were initially installed in the Pacific coast and in the Caribbean coast of the country. But most importantly, like enslaved Black people like began to organize the struggle. Like they began like organize the struggle to create free population like along these areas, hiding in the mountains, in the thick jungles, as a form of absolute resistance in opposition to the European slave system, right? So as a first point, the nature, the jungle, the mountains, the river have been the first and main allies of Native and Black communities in their path of struggle and resistance from the very beginning. So it was, you know, it was the land who actually made possible life in this continent. And those free towns created are called palenques, and we have data that around 39 palenques were created during the 17th and 18th century. And Mary was telling us about, you know, how Palenque San Basilio still remains in the country, and all of their customs and wisdom that they still you know, like preserve in the area. So this only shows that our ancestors were in a constant search of freedom, and that we are descendants of that history of revolution and seek of freedom all the time. So these free towns in where Black people could settle and try to build life actually had and still had an infinite diversity, fauna and flora, like fertile lands, diverse sources of water, and indigenous and Black communities confined by this system in the peripheries of the country, like they were always in direct contact with the land and with the territory and with life. So there, I think, so I think that so all of this context plus all their wisdom, all the reinterpretation of the knowledge brought from Africa and the exchange of knowledge among, you know, indigenous communities of the regions made and allowed life in community possible, with the space around as the only and unique option of means for survival and existence of Black communities in the midst, basically of an oppressive and racist system. So Black communities created a system of beliefs, a system of knowledge, a system of practices, values, and even symbolic representations based on that relationship of parity and respect with the surrounding environment. And all of these constructions determine their own cosmovision. because Black communities, the way that they perceive their territory is the community can be or is and can be in the extent that their territory is and can be, because the territory is the one that keeps the memory of each of the practices and each of the knowledge and each of the value. So for example, in Colombia, Black people recognize themselves according to their territory. For example, Raizales communities, they are located in San Andrés y Providencia, which is an island in Colombia, and their custom, their history, and even their own history of resistance have been very different from the continental Colombia. So you can see how territory is not only life, but also identity. And that's why it's like very, very important to Black communities as well. So sometimes I feel that explain what territory is can be very difficult because it's just something that you know, and it's like a relationship that have existed that you grow up in there that is very hard to explain in words. So that's why I wanted to like kind of show some examples of some ancestral practices that kind of show this relationship so you can understand better what I am talking about. So for example, this one, the ancestral medicine, is one of the most recognized practices of resistance in Black communities in Colombia. And it is the product of a racist system that has never guaranteed the life and protection of Black communities in Colombia, in the country. And to the contrary, has marginalized and condemned them to death since colonization. And in response to this, then communities have developed forms of care that have literally safeguarded our lives, and have kept us alive and healthy. And this practice assumes the territory, the nature, as a great pharmacy, as as where plants can literally cure every single disease and every single pain. And if you think about it, this practice themselves include a large number of areas of knowledge that and that were that have been developing since before the industries and since before these institutions of knowledge were even created. So Black communities are literally experts in botany. They're literally experts. They're doctors, nurses, and pharmacologists, because these practices involves searching of plants, classifying the plants, studying the plants, the uses, benefits, and for each of the diseases and for each of the pains, to determine even the correct quantities of each of the plants, the mixes, the doses, all of this. So it's amazing and incredible to me how this practice have been developed and how is it still maintained as an alternative to the non-existent health centers and hospitals that are in that we cannot find in our territories. So for example, in my state, in Chocó, the conditions of the hospitals are so precarious that a woman can actually die giving birth. And to resist to that, or as a response to that, we have la partería, for example. And la partería is where really wise women, they take care of pregnant women of pregnancy since the very early month of pregnancy, and they know exactly the position of the baby. They know if there is any problem, and they diagnose the mother. They provide herbs and medicine if necessary. So in this practice in particular, la partería, Black women have been the leaders of this practice. And this is only all of the ways that Black women have been resistant to this system from every single angle. But taking care of, pregnancy is not the only thing that a lot of that Black people do. think that they can heal literally everything, like malaria, fractures. Like we have international recognized people who actually can heal fractures with herbs, but also fever, flus, mal de ojo. I don't even know how to translate mal de ojo at all. I don't even know how to explain mal de ojo at all. But I've been, my grandmother used to do like a lot of bath with herbs to cure this, and with storm massages around the body, that I used to cry, but they were really, really, they were really good. If anybody knows how to translate mal de ojo and how to explain mal de ojo in the with the people in here, please let me know, because I just don't know how to explain it. But all of this disease and most of the disease are treated. I think that there are some comments in here. Let me see if I can see them. Evil eye. I don't I don't know. I don't know if that's a good translation for that. I don't think that people can understand what mal de ojo will mean. But yeah, it's just a disease that we decided to call mal de ojo. So all of these diseases are treated with the power of plants, from the knowledge of communities have acquired and developed and adapted into the context that they live now. And this only shows how the territory itself is the one that actually makes possible that historical memory, that memory that is not written or captured anywhere else, but it is transmitted orally to keep it alive by the territory, by the proximity to it, or even by the practice of the practice itself, and this is just like keep it alive from generation to generation. And that's only that. Another of these practices is traditional mining, which has been like a millennial practice for Black communities, especially for those located along the Pacific coast. And this type of mining is different from mainstream mining, since it's a smaller scale practice that is developed outside of the framework of accumulation and excess. And in the contrary to that, it is based more on a collective work and the relationships that are built based on that practice. So, but most importantly, actually, is this like the practice guarantees the existence of the river and the gold. So that's to say that the continuity and preservation and care of the land is part of the practice, and as a form of retribution to all the life that the territory makes possible. So this is only an example that Black communities in Colombia and Black communities in Latin America and Black communities around the world have been developing and resisting from alternative practices to this system, and that living outside of that system of profitable driving and accumulation values is possible, and it's being done for the longest time. Right? So we have a lot to learn from all of this practice, and we have a lot to learn from all of these communities to reorganize this world that is going crazy, right? Then another one of the practice is el obligamiento. And I think this is a very, very beautiful practice, which consists of planting the umbilical cord of the newborns in the ground. So when the babies are born, the first thing that is done is to cut the umbilical cord and give it to the family. I don't know what you do with the umbilical cord in here, but over there they give us to the family, and the family plants that umbilical cord in the ground. And this is like a very symbolic and beautiful way to creating like a deep and unbreakable bond with the land, with the territory. So with the other mother, with Mother Earth. So Black communities, so like you can just imagine how hard it is for Black communities to detach themselves from that territory, because it's detached themselves from their identity, from their mother, from the memory that makes possible for them to be and to exist. And when I was thinking about the practices that I wanted to share with you in this presentation, I was talking with my mom. I was asking her if she remembered when my umbilical cord was planting. And she got extremely excited about all of the practices that we have. And she was like, oh my God, you need to share this, and then you need to share that. And that was really beautiful. And then she asked me to call my aunt. So it was a really beautiful, path for me to put together this presentation. It was a collective effort to, put this presentation for you all, including my mom, my aunts, and even some neighbors. But what I wanted to say is that, like my umbilical cord is actually buried or planted in my grandma's patio in Quibdó, which is the capital city of Chocó. And what I think is really beautiful and amazing is, Chocó, Quibdó is a urban center. And all of these practices occur most of the time in rural contexts. But I think it's very beautiful how the concept and the connection with the territory is maintained whenever we go, and how it transforms as the context or the notion of the territory transforms as well. So I think it was a very beautiful conversation with my mom. I already knew that my belly button was planted there, but I just wanted to, ask if she remembered, if she knew. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you guys, like people from Colombia, for Afro-Colombians in the room, if you remember or if you know if your umbilical cord was planted somewhere, and if you do, what is that mean? What is the meaning of that territory for you? Like, what is that piece of land assigned to you when you were born means to you? And if you want to share, that will be amazing. If you can leave it on the comments, that will be amazing. If it's in Spanish, it's amazing as well. We will try to translate it. But I want to know, like, I will definitely would like to know. And then if you don't know, I encourage you to ask to your mothers, to your grandmothers, and whoever may know if they remember. Let me see if there is. I will definitely ask my mom. Yes, please do. I think it's a very, very beautiful conversation to have. Okay, so I think that Yaritza was trying to explain what mal de ojo was, the disease that I was talking before. And she said, the way I've explained it is just having a heavy personality and having mischievous intentions. A lot of people traditionally wear a piece of jewelry with a blue eye, collecting negativity vibe, and it will reap when it's reached its capacity, essentially. Yeah, that's true. Like, I could never explain that, to be honest, but I know what mal de ojo is for sure. So thank you, Yaritza, for sharing it. First time hearing, this is very interesting. Yes, I'm glad that you're learning something new. Okay, so we don't have many comments in here. People are shy today. I've heard this in Jamaica. That's interesting. I didn't know about this. I will definitely try to read more about the tradition in Jamaica because it makes sense. Mariel is asking her mom now. So I'm glad I'm encouraging you guys to ask about this really nice thing to know. But yeah. Okay, so, and the last one, I'm not gonna go deeper on that, is like, we also have like mythical symbols or mythical characters actually that are used to reinforce behavioral codes, and especially among children. And these symbols are kind of inspired by the nature and inspire also a good behavior with nature. And folks in here can tell you how terrific, how creepy those characters were that they actually work. Like, for example, la Madre Monte, like mother of, I don't know, plants or a bunch of bushes. La Madre Agua, mother water. Like all of these characters were like alive beings that were, you know, in there in the case that we were bad behaving when we were children. So yeah, so, you know, based, you know, on all of this, the territory is not seen as a piece of land, you know, it's just a set of elements that influence the way of being and the way of resisting and the way to understand the world as a whole. So that's why the territory is life, you know, because it is life itself that makes possible more life. It's make possible the life of humans, the life of non-humans like plants, animals, and even mystic characters, and the reborn, right? I think that this is a very deep and constant concept all the time among Black communities. It is very important to leave land for the reborns, for los renacientes. So in Black women in Colombia, I will always visible show the job that Black women do wherever I go, especially in Colombia. And Black women have played a very fundamental role in the construction and preservation of all of these practices, as well as, you know, ways of resistance to remain in their communities in their land, to, you know, keep doing and keep practicing what they believe, you know, should be practicing. So these are some of the ways people and Black women define their territories. And for example, this one is, territory is life, and life is not possible without the territory. Territory is life, and life is not for sale. It is loved and defended. I think it sounds way better in Spanish, so I'm going to tell her in Spanish. El territorio es la vida, y la vida no se vende, se ama y se defiende. That's... And this, the last one, is territory for Black people is the real possibility of giving birth to freedom, autonomy, and self-determination. It is our space for being. And this one was actually said by told by Francia Marquez, which is our current vice president, the first Black vice president of the country. And I will be talking a little bit more about her and about her path of resistance in the country a little bit later. So because of all of that the territory implies for the life, for the identity, and for the survival of Black communities in Colombia, there is a lot that protects this vision from the dominance perspectives and the interests of the capitalist system. So this is the Law 70, and this law basically guarantee the access and the free exercise of the practices and cosmovisions of ethnic groups within the territories that they have been historically inhabited. And it creates basically collective land titles and collective land rights for Black communities, indigenous, well, this one in particular for Black communities, but also there are collective lands and collective rights for indigenous communities and some peasant communities in Colombia. So this law, it was of course thanks to the protests of the community in the 80s, and especially the ones along the Pacific coast. Activists, groups, and social leaders were organized and mobilized during that time to create this law. And it was possible. It was possible in the middle of a constituyente, which is basically the change of the constitution. And now we have this law possible thanks to that struggle and thanks to that movement in the 80s. So as you can see in the presentation, so some of the objectives of the line, as I was saying, is first to guarantee access and permanence of Black communities in the territory, protect the cultural identity and memory of the communities, and to promote economic development under their own cosmovisions. So based on that, this implies that Black communities, not individuals, are the owners of the land. And therefore, any project that is intended to be developed in these communities have to be consulted with the community. And even more when these projects are coming from outside the community itself. So there is a right to prior consultation to the community for them to develop anything that they want to develop. So it's the community who decide which project is developed and which project is not, right? This is a very, very important law for the Black movement in Colombia. And actually, I think the last week, some indigenous communities in Brazil just ruled in their favor a law like this one, and they were just like celebrating because this is actually one of the main and basic things for Black communities and Native communities to actually being able to practice their own customs and culture and values regarding the land. So this is, I was not going to spend too much time here. This is just to tell you that there are around 196 collective territories in Colombia based on DANI, and they are basically located in the Pacific side of the country, as you can see in this map on the left. So everything that I have been just mentioned about Black communities, as well as indigenous communities in some extent, has been happening within a racist, classist, and neoliberal country. So the question now is, how does everything fit into that picture? How does everything that I have been just mentioning about the values and ideas and cosmovisions of Black people fit into this picture of a neoliberal country, right? How Black communities can actually practice their custom, and how Black community, especially Black women, have been resistant to this system or this context that they have around, right? So Colombia, like many other countries in the global south, it was like a huge debt crisis during the 70s and 80s. And due to that, the United States, the World Bank actually enacted a law, not a law, it was a set of policies called the Washington Consensus, right? And the Washington Consensus were a set of 10 policies, and they were intended to improve the condition of these countries mainly in the global south. And these policies were under the umbrella of privatization, free market, tax tariff, internationalization, and all of this. So, so the government started to privatize a lot of businesses, a lot of lands. They were prioritizing foreign investment and all of that. And in the middle of this idea of free market and open up the country for other for the international trade, Black communities' visions and methods do not make sense at all, right? So our territories and our lands are usually categorized as unexploited or underexploited. So investors and the government see our lands as an opportunity rather than all the concept of territory that I've been telling you about, or that I've been talking about, or more than that, the concept of territory that Black communities, indigenous communities have been developed through all its history in the country. So traditional lands and collective titles in Black communities have been at this intersection between the law and the power. And in so many cases, not to say all, those are like the same thing. And in the context of Colombia, like the conflict has been like a fundamental piece on this conversation, that you can imagine how complex can be, that I will probably not even have time to talk about all of it. But if we kind of start with war, I think that Black communities have had like a differentiated and particular impact on Black communities, the war itself. And as I already mentioned, Black communities are geographically located in the peripheries of the country, and the government and its institutions are almost inexistent on those areas. And the presence that we usually have from them is army, like they just put armies in those territories. And this is the perfect environment for illegal groups, for state-funded groups and legal armed groups to stay and operate in territories. Therefore, the war has been disproportionately impacted and displaced Afro-Colombian people and Afro-Colombian landholders. And even like from the total amount of displaced people, around 17% of them are Afro-Colombian. And if you still remember the figure that the National Statistics Department provides, saying that Afro-Colombians are 9.3, then from that figure, we can actually like say that 17% of the displaced people is almost like double their population share. So you can notice how the disproportion in the impact of the conflict in our communities. And it is even way more deeper when we're talking about sexual assault among Black women in their territories. So I just wanted to show you this video from Seferina Banquez. Seferina she just died. She was a cantautora de bullerengue, which is one of the biggest genres created by Afro-Colombian and Black communities in the north side of the country. And she was one of the biggest exponents of this genre. And she was also displaced in Colombia. And she was talking a lot about the history of displacement in Colombia. And I was supposed to translate all of it, but I just, kept some sentences for you to kind of, see how she was telling her story, and how she decided to put that story of suffering in a song to visualize or to show the problem to the world. So let me know if you can hear it.
Adiós, adiós, mamá. ¿Cómo yo he sido aplazada? Adiós, adiós, mamá. Yo salí de la montaña. Adiós, adiós, mamá. De los montes de María. Adiós, adiós, mamá. En el sol de la mañana. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Yo escuché unos tiroteos. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Como yo estaba asustada. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Me paseaba y me paseaba. Adiós, adiós, mamá. De la sala a la cocina. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Era con mi madrina. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Yo lloraba sin consuelo. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Nadie me avisó a mi abuelo. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Mataron a mi sobrino. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Nadie me avisó a mi abuelo. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Mataron a mi sobrino. Adiós, adiós, mamá. A Colombia, a Colombia. Adiós, adiós, mamá. La nación está complicada. Adiós, adiós, mamá. La violencia no se acaba. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Y nunca le ponen fin. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Tenemos que estar asustadas. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Con el presidente Santo. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Y el expresidente Uribe. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Y también con Tinochenko. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Y todos los colombianos. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Tenemos que perdonar. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Para conseguir la paz. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Tenemos que perdonar. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Para conseguir la paz. Adiós, adiós, mamá. Todos somos colombianos. Adiós, adiós, mamá.
So we're not gonna hear all the song, but this part, I think, displacement has been just like a major issue among Black communities, and how Black communities experience displacement, considering all of the attachments and social constructions that they have with their territory, is an erasement of a whole identity in a whole memory. So we usually also call this desombligamiento, like kind of making an illusion now, like kind of connecting with the practices that I was telling before, because it's not even something that they're like the current or the mainstream definition of displacement do not account for all of the erasement that is happening when Indigenous and Black communities are displaced from their territory. So desobligamiento, we believe, is a better term for that. And basically, like the armed conflict in Colombia, like one of the main causes of displacement have been drug cultivation. And armed groups have been displacing Black communities disproportionately just to cultivate coca crops. And even when Black communities are able to stay in their territories, they are surrounded by drug cultivation. And it's very well documented how all these cultivations and coca crops brings a lot of social violence and environmental degradation among them. So Black communities have been usually living in their territories around the conflict when they are able to stay in their territories. And a lot of women and a lot of collectives have been fighting this in Colombia, and this is the case of Sara Liliana Quiñones, who have been fighting since last decade this, and because of that, I'm sorry, I have to connect my my computer really quick. Okay, we're good. Sorry about that. So she has been fighting this since the longest time in Colombia, and because of that, she has been displaced of her territory. She has been harassed, and she has been put in jail. Her and her mom were put in jail in 2018 because of her, fight against coca crops and collective rights within Tumaco in the Pacific Coast in Colombia. And then just to kind of wrap up and finished, so the war is not the only perpetrator of displacement among Black communities, but there's also illegal mining. And when I say illegal mining, I'm talking about both. I'm talking about mining projects who do not have permission to exploit the land, but also mining projects who have permission to exploit the land, but they're violating Afro-Colombian right of prior consultation. So they're both illegal mining. And Afro-Colombians only hold 3% of the land in the country, but the illegal mining, based on some statistics from the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, says that 47% of the illegal mining is among Afro-Colombian community lands. So you know how disproportionately also Afro-Colombians are being displaced due to illegal mining, and these projects have been occupying these collective lands in Colombia, and they have devastating consequences in terms of environmental consequences, basically. Francia Marquez, the actual vice president, she along with other 80 Afro-Colombian women, they led a mobilization called Mujeres por el Cuidado de la Vida y los Territorios Ancestrales, which means Women for the Care of Life and the Ancestral Territories. And they live in a town called La Toma Cauca in the west side of the country. And there were mining projects in that territory, even knowing that they did not allow that project to be there. So they were demanding that for the longest time. And even when the court ruled in their favor, they were still in there. They were still in their land, and they could not, plant, and they could not do anything in the land because the mining projects were there. So they got tired, and they decided to walk from their town in La Toma to Bogota, the capital city, and they walked from 10 days straight to raise awareness in all over the country about what was happening in La Toma. And of course, they got the attention, and they succeed, and they were able to push all of the mining projects out from their land. And Francia Marquez, actually, she won Goldman Prize because of that amazing mobilization that they did. So this is, again, another of the ways that, Black women have been fighting and resisting against the system to maintain their community in their territories. And I think, okay, I thought that was it. But, this one in particular, this is another cause of displacement among Black communities. But Mary talked about this on Tuesday. So if you haven't seen that presentation, please go ahead. I don't know if it's already uploaded in the YouTube channel, but it will be uploaded on the YouTube channel, so you can go ahead and check it. But Mary was telling about how Afro-Colombian communities have been victims of development in the country, and the situation in particular in Buenaventura. So she was talking about Buenaventura, about the port of Buenaventura, and how Buenaventura is in the intersection between the government, the private investment, and also armed groups, and how private investors, in alliance with the government and in alliance with the armed groups, they displace people to expand these projects. And on top of that, the population in Buenaventura are not even getting benefit by these projects. But this situation have been not only happening in Buenaventura, in the port of Buenaventura, but also in so many other industries in Colombia. For example, the industry of palm oil and sugar cane, which were able to grow during the 2000s due to the illegal land appropriation, social displacement, violence among Afro-Colombian regions, especially in Chocó and Cauca, and as well as the Caribbean coast in the north. Yes, so Buenaventura is not the only case of development that have been that have been massively displacing Black communities in Colombia. So this capitalist approach, this new approach that Colombia had been, have been trying to destroy Black communities as a whole. And knowing the deep repercussions that they have about Black communities, they have been resistant and fighting just as the first, cimarrones and cimarronas did when they first stepped in this country, in Colombia. So this is everything I have for today, but I know Professor Jaira wants us to see the documentary about Dulce, and I think that it kind of relates with the last topic that I talk about, victims of development, since this the temperatures basically led or driven by this massive production of goods and services that we actually do not need, are kind of driving what's the word that I want to use, sorry, say it again.
Oh, actually, if you are planning to show the documentary, we would like to have some time for you to engage with the guests today. So it's 10 minutes. Dulce is amazing. It does cover this issue of land and territory, centering Black women and their stories and narratives, and thinking about the kind of consequences that this constant expansion that a capitalist approach to lands and territories in conflict with what are the practices, the values, and the rights now with Law 70 of Black and Indigenous communities in Colombia. So we should
I agree.
Yeah, because people want to talk, and you've given us so much to think about. But do you have any other slides you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Now I want to hear more, like from people. I want to hear, like final thoughts, like any, any ideas, any practice, any concepts that call your attention, anything that resonates with you, anything that you would like to know more about, any word, anything that you would like to kind of, discuss a little bit more, or even ask to me and to other, like people in the room, they are pretty welcome. And yeah, so we have some times for questions, for comments, and for final thoughts, and to, just debrief and kind of close this conversation.
And as you're thinking, we can also thank Professora Digna for this beautiful, thoughtful, brilliant presentation. It gives us so much to think about, and maybe some people just want to take a breath and absorb all of this information that you've given us. So thank you for that fascinating presentation. And your reflections about Black communities and ancestral territories as tantamount to life gives us a new perspective to think about belonging, community, and identity. And we are so fortunate to have you join us. And gracias por compartir este conocimiento con nosotros. Estoy tan orgullosa de ti. And so we will now welcome any comments or reflections. I know that there's so much to think about. And so please, viewing audience, you may drop some ideas in the chat. You can also raise your hand. She's ready to dialogue and engage. It's incredible, as she mentioned, the kind of dialogue that we can have in this room right now that may not always be available to us. So please feel free to ask questions. Yasuri asks, are there any alliances or relationships that Afro-Colombians have with neighboring countries? For example, Panama. To your knowledge, are there international kinds of supports?
Well, like, unfortunately, like, this type of alliances are not encouraged, like, by, by institutions or by the government or by, anything in general. But there have been some approaches from universities to kind of encourage, for example, the relationship among universities. And I think that's also like a very nice and beautiful way to connect among each other. So there's, sometimes I've heard more about, research alliances between Brazil, Colombia, also Argentina in some type of way, in the Black population in Argentina, and among the Pacific, there is a Pacific, what is the name of it? La Alianza del Pacífico, the Pacific Alliance. So not in particular among Black and Afro-Colombian relationships, but that is actually something that Francia Marquez wants to do. And she recently did a trip to 3 countries in Africa. I think it was South Africa, Kenya, and I don't remember the other one. So Colombia do not encourage their, their ancestry, and they do not support their Black ancestry among the country. So, and you will not even find embassies of some specific countries in Colombia. You would not, for example, find embassies from any African country in Colombia except of Morocco. So, that the interest, so from those type of things, that the interest of the country is not support or encourage anything related with their Black or even indigenous ancestry. So some of the relationships that have been happening have been more as an effort of other institutions, of collectives that want to collaborate in terms of research, want to collaborate in terms of international exchange and things like that. But other than that, not much.
Thank you. Some other comments, lots of love in the chat as well. I loved how you mentioned the burial of the umbilical cords I think it demonstrates the tangible connection the communities have to the land, especially when some of them are more intangible and spiritual. Muy bien dicho. Naomi
Yes,
shared that.
yes, that is, I believe that is one of the most beautiful, practices that I can talk about. I think it's just beautiful to have a piece of land that is part of you, that is beautiful.
Nina also says here, thank you so much for this powerful presentation. Listening to the song by Serafina Banquez and reading the lyrics was heartbreaking and so impactful. It's sad under the name of development, the reality that there is so much violence and erasure that happens.
That is so true. And I wanted to share a song just because, it might be a little bit easier to process because I can't even read. There's an institution in Colombia now with the peace process called La Comisión de la Verdad, which is an institution that seeks for the truth of the conflict. And but that truth is based or from the perspective or the lens of the victims of the conflict. So in the reports, you can see and read how the victims experience the conflict, and I don't have words. I can't do it. So I just wanted to show you a little bit, just a small part of how victims and how Afro-Colombian victims of displacement and conflict kind of live and survive this, because it's just heartbreaking and it's just painful and it's horrible. But yeah, I agree with you, Nina.
And a comment here that I think also could lead to some additional dialogue. Valeria says, it was wonderful to be here today in this powerful space. We Afro-Colombians are different in all the states. I learned a lot about Afro-Colombians in Chocó today. I love that you mentioned the importance of territory in our identity. Amazing. Now, conversations like this about territory, identity, Black communities, in your experience, and you are Afro-Colombian, you are very deeply connected to your heritage. Are these conversations regular or routine, the kind of education that one receives about the value of Black and Indigenous knowledges or one's relationship to the land? What would you say about that? Or even any others? Do we get to hear these dialogues in educational settings? What do you make of that?
And I will encourage anybody in the audience to talk about it as well if you want to. But in our experience, not at all. Like, of course, we're part of an education system that it is not done and created by us. And in that terms, in that way, that education system have always been invisibilizing Black communities, invisibilizing the all of the things that Black communities have done in the country to construct or to build a nation. But most importantly, all of these new concepts of, not even new concepts, different concepts of land, this way to, perceive land, live the land, experience the land and the territory are now part of the conversations. So we can, if we want to learn about this, we have to create our safest spaces to do this. So it's the movement, it's collective groups like grupos de base groups, I don't know. And all of these amazing, spaces from Juntanza that kind of lead the conversation and kind of, support and encourage Black population to actually learn and get appropriate of our real history, to get appropriate about the truth, and, to kind of reconnect with those values, because the displacement is a huge thing right now in Colombia, and as long as Black populations are moving into urban centers, a lot of these values and a lot of these customs are, getting lost in that way, en el desobligamiento.
Thank you for sharing that. We have a couple of comments and questions to address in the 5 minutes that we have left. But one beautiful comment to share is I just wanted to comment on the 10-day walk that they did being successful. It was so great to see Black resistance be successful due to all the people against Black movements, for example. The police brutality against Black Americans during the Black Lives Matter movement. I just think it is so encouraged for us to continue resisting because despite some failures, success is possible. So yes, it was beautiful to see that walk and that ultimately the outcomes were in the favor of supporting and sustaining the life-giving aspects of the community there and pushing back against further mining that was neglecting and damaging the community.
Yes. Yes. And I actually encourage you to watch the videos from that mobilization. It is amazing how, they speak. Wow. Like you will truly understand the meaning of territory when you see, Black women fighting for their territory. So la piel se me eriza. I don't know how to say that. But I still remember the speeches and they were amazing.
Yes, yes. Valeria says, our reality is exactly what you described in terms of education. So thank you for educating us here in this room as well. Professor Jewell says, thank you for this. There are so many connections here with the experiences of Indigenous people in the Americas and in the Pacific. What do you think about the possibility of building solidarities with these communities?
I think it's the way to go. I think that it is so necessary that I still don't understand why we still do not have initiatives to encourage this. I think there is so much power on it, and there is so much that we should learn from all of these communities that have been, living and resisting in so many different ways that, it is a good thing for the world in general. I think that, the world doesn't know where to go now. And a lot of those answers are in these communities, because these communities have been creating these ways of living and surviving from a very different set of values that I think are important for the permanence of us in this world. And I think that that's something that the world, the capitalism doesn't have at all. So I think that, making these connections and building these solidarity connections among all of these all of these communities who believe in something different will maximize all of these narratives, and will maximize all of this practice, and we will be more encouraging and to kind of rethink about all of the things that we do.
Thank you for that. And last, Carolina asking, what are your thoughts about contextualizing this knowledge for children of the Afro-Colombian diaspora that are arrived young and may not be able to return to their respective territories? So how to pass along this information? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that if in history, we have seen how Black population in general have this beautiful ability to rebuild or to re-exist no matter, what's going on, right? So I think that it is possible to even maintain some of those practices, even with the context or the territory even if the territory where Black population originally were changed. And an example of that was, for example, that my umbilical cord was still buried in a patio. It was a literally small piece of land, but it was buried. And I know, for example, my grandma, she used to also plant my hair. So when she combed my hair, all the hair that was coming off, she was planting it on spot, in una matera. How do you say matera? Well, in these little spots that you plant, that you plant inside the home. So she was doing that, you know, she was planting my hair in her idea, or, you know, if you plant your own hair, it will grow more, you know? So I think that these and many other, you know, stories around can show us that we can still maintain a lot of our practices and a lot of our knowledge, no matter where we are. So that's the first thing. But the second one, of course, we need an education system that support this type of narratives and support this type of things, because I think that the movement have done a lot and have done a great job, but the movement is not everywhere, you know? So I think that we have, for example, an Afro-Colombian class that it is supposed to be taught by, you know, everyone in Colombia, but actually it's only taught and only to, you know, Black communities. And I think that can be like a first step, just to make mandatory that those type of classes and encourage those type of knowledge and things among mainstream educational systems, as well as kind of integrating more of these conversations and discussions in that class. Because I took that class and I don't remember anything of this from the class. So I think that, you know, kind of redesigning that curriculum in a way that we can incorporate these type of discussions will be amazing to kind of preserve these, you know, these narratives and customs among the new generations who can't be in the territory.
Well, thank you so much for your education of this group here today. We are so grateful for your presence. Muchas gracias. And so everybody, please give your applause and attention to Professora Digna Mosquera. And we are so grateful for your presence today. And we will come back to this series on October 5th, next Thursday at 12:30 p.m. with presenters Roger Richer and Luana Barbosa. And I wish everyone a great day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Digna. So
Thank you, everyone. Should we stop sharing now, right?